Previously on Classroom Hacks. And he himself was a natural storyteller. One thing that I learned from him was that I don't think he ever actually really sold the item. He sold like the idea of the item through a story. Like, oh, you're not buying a $100,000 rug, you're buying a new piece to your home. And he would never say house, he would say to your home. You're completing this room. This brings everything together. He always told the story around the actual piece. And that was something that I carried with me through into my teaching and I use this as an example all the time, some of the greatest shows, whether it's Mad Men, whether it's Breaking Bad, even early Walking Dead, where it's never about the advertising, it's not about the meth, it's not about the zombies, it's about the people and the idea behind the human condition and what we go through. And to me, that's always been the important thing to get out of that is how do you connect to your students through that level? And you're not just telling them or you're not just selling them the lesson plan, you're trying to tell them the story around it, why it's important. Good morning, everybody, on this beautiful Monday morning. And before we get started, Pedro, some news for you. By the time that our audience is listening to this, we will have most likely have hit 1,000 Twitter followers and 500 Facebook followers.
Really?
So at a good round, even 1,500 followers for this little podcast we've done called Classroom Hacks. It's an amazing thing.
Now, would you consider 1,000 Twitter and 500 Facebook? Is that pretty impressive?
I'd say so.
Yeah. Okay. I feel better now. Well, I grew up as a technology immigrant, as they say. Mm-hmm. In other words, technology like it is today wasn't around when I was a kid.
Right.
But you didn't have the internet as a little boy, though, did you?
No. The only internet I had was the internetting of my bathing suit.
Well, I won't go down that road.
And that's why we've managed to get 1,500 followers on our social media platforms.
Very nice. Nicely done.
And thank you to all of you who have joined us on this journey, who follow us and help make Classroom Hacks this growing thing that we hope to continue to provide you with great quality content. Well, great is subjective, but at least quality content.
We're trying to be great, but we know we don't always live up to it, but we try.
Yeah, so absolutely, every day that we're here. And we hope that what we've provided you has been insightful and has been helpful and has made you even laugh along the way because, as we've said from the very first show, teachers love to do two things, and that's teach and complain. And we're here to listen to your complaints. We're here to hopefully give you some relatable material that you can say to yourself, yes, I know exactly what these guys are saying and are going through. So thank you from both of us and anyone here who's contributed to Classroom Hacks. We truly appreciate it.
Hear, hear.
And with that, we are live from the pedagogy. Exactly, and that's perfect because our episode today is about failure. And so let's try that again. Live from the pantheon of pedagogy, the mecca of methodology, your vacation from vacation with your blooper reel buddies, where you can learn to seriously take teaching not so seriously. This is, and we are Classroom Hacks.
And what's your name?
My name is Eric Tan.
And I'm Peter Canetis. Although when we checked in just now here at our studios, the lady had trouble identifying you in the system.
Yeah, and I think that was her ploy to try to keep us there until someone could come and grab me and take me away.
Yeah. Well, she didn't meet. We haven't met her before. So
it's true.
It's part of the,
and so we looked at her and we're like, you don't know? You haven't heard?
Of Classroom Hacks? She's like, well, I can see the hack part.
So anyway, today we are talking about failure with the aptly titled title of this episode, Blooper Reel. Today we're looking at some of the daily fails we've gone through, some of the epic fails we might have had in class, and then on the second half of this episode, we'll kind of touch on some of the student emails, the student email fails that we've had that we just say to ourselves, why in the holy heck would a student hit the send button with this? And so we hope you enjoy this one. Pedro, can you give us any insight on maybe how you might fail, stumble, run into an issue on a day-to-day basis? What are some small things that you might just fail at here and there?
I was thinking to set this up, if someone says, hey, why are you guys doing a show on this topic or these topics for today? What would you say?
I would say that failure is probably one of the best teachers that we have in life.
Yeah, I agree.
That in reality, you probably learn more from failure than you do from success.
Yeah.
And without it, we can't improve. We don't know what to modify, what to change, what to do better. And if we never get hurt, we never know how to love better. We never know how to be better. We never know how to improve in the station in life that we're at. And so I would definitely say that failure is not a bad thing. And that's what this episode will try to show you, is that even from times when you might be at your lowest, that if you work hard and you pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do better. You can be better.
Yeah, no, very well said. I just want to set that up. In fact, that is your answer, just so that our listeners know. We did not rehearse that part. I just kind of threw that question at Eric on the fly, and everything you said I agree with.
If this was baseball, we would have said he threw me a cookie right there.
A cookie, a hanging curveball.
A can of corn.
Can of corn. And, but it's so true. So much of the stuff that we learn and the successes that we've had lay on a foundation of mistakes and failures. And, it's the old story of the famous people. One of the famous examples of Thomas Edison. How many times did he fail to invent, or as he's trying to invent the light bulb, I think it was like close to 1,000, wasn't it? Like 1,000 failures before he got it right.
Yeah, how many times was he electrocuted before that, really?
And yes.
He was like, his hair is all frizzy and standing up, and he's just like, I finally did it.
And that was not his departing words. I think he lived after that. He actually has one of my favorite quotes of all time. He says, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work.
Oh, that is a great quote.
Yeah.
And a little thing about Thomas Edison people may not know is that he is the inspiration behind the song The Electric Slide, and it's electric.
Is that true?
No, I have no idea.
All right. Who's had more coffee this morning, you or me?
I don't think I've had enough coffee yet.
All right. What was the question again?
Who are we? So what are some daily things you might just fail at or slip up at, even outside of teaching? Do you have anything?
You're asking me to give away some of my daily?
Like, for example, I know that on occasion, Pedro might forget his flash drive somewhere, and to a degree might have to put tie a shoelace around it, figure things out, things like that.
Yeah, I have left flash drives in classrooms. I have lost count of how many times I've done that. So I've tried different things. The latest thing I'm trying, which seems to be working, is I have tied to the end of my flash drives a bright fluorescent shoelace. So it could be green or orange. And as I'm leaving, that thing is just screaming at me, grabbing my attention so I don't forget it. Now, I know these days where everything is headed is the cloud or having documents up in the biosphere somewhere. And so I know that flash drives in the near future will probably be pretty much obsolete. Do you think that it's going that route?
Oh, yeah, completely. And just a little tidbit of advice in regards to failure and learning from that is one of the things that I think we do on a daily basis is just forget. We might forget our keys somewhere. We might forget our flash drive. We might forget our wallet. And then all of a sudden we have to figure out a solution to that particular problem. And one of the failures that I had early on in my career is before there were even flash drives that could hold, because now flash drives can hold up to 50, 60, 100 gigabytes worth of material. Before, if you wanted something to hold that much material, you needed an external hard drive. And when I was first starting off and I worked at Joliet Junior College, I remember I used to get up at 4:30, 5 a.m. sometimes to get to school by 5:30, 6 a.m. And I had an external flash drive, and it wasn't one of those, or external hard drive, and it wasn't one of those giant externals that you have that you use, like gamers might use for storing data. It was probably one of those handheld ones. But the problem was, it was one of those cold mornings, and I had put everything in my car, which was parked outside. I had gone back in for something, and I probably took a little longer than I wanted to. And since the car was already cold, by the time I got to school, I plugged in the external hard drive, and it did not work. all my material was on there, everything I needed for that particular day, and just my entire semester was on there because I store everything on my flash drive. And then to admit this, that I went into class one day and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do because I had like everything was there. I depended too much on that.
What happened to it?
Because it was so cold, it just froze and would not work. Even you plugged in, I tried warming it, I tried holding it in my hands, doing all these different things.
Is that a temporary situation? Like the information's gone for good, or just while it's too cold, or while
no,
it's
that
freezing?
information was gone for good at that
goodness.
point.
See, I'm not as you can tell, Eric is much more tech savvy than I am.
Yeah, and so from that point on, I mean, I went to class that day, and I pretty much just did like a Q&A pretty much because I had no idea what I was going to
Did you
teach.
share the story with the students?
I did not.
Okay.
And that's something I've learned to do going forward is, one, if you ever any fall in your life, depending on obviously how personal it is, never be afraid to sort of share that with your students. Even if you go in and you say, is anyone else having a bad day today? Sometimes that sort of candor is a good way to open up your class because students will see obviously that you're human too. You're not prone to from folly or anything of that nature. But what I also learned from that day is that to have multiple backups and multiple files for things is crucial. And that's one of those things that you want to make sure that if you can back it up on multiple things. Now I have multiple flash drives. I use the cloud. I use Google Drive. I use Dropbox. And now I know that in the event anything is to ever happen to any of those, I have a backup of a backup of a backup. How about you, Pedro? Is there any point where you sort of missed the mark in class or anything of that nature?
Oh, so many times, right? Too many to count. Just if I went and, well, first of all, I couldn't remember them all, but even if I did, that would take hours and hours and hours. Yeah, let me try and think. Well, here's one on the humorous side. So I go into class. I had to come across, you know how sometimes you have a class that you have two classes back to back, and you have maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get to the next one, and sometimes the two classrooms are kind of far from each other, so you have to be pretty quick. You can't waste time after one class to get to the other, and so I was in a hurry, and I would always get to this one class about 2 or 3 minutes before it starts. So I'd come in huffing and puffing because I was cruising across campus to get there, and so I get there about 2 minutes before class starts. Class does start. I take out the textbook, and I'm like, okay, guys, what did Smith, the author of our textbook, what did Smith mean on the page of, on 117 by ontological status? Okay, that's a philosophical term. And I'm getting blank stares, I'm getting confusion, and you know how hard it is sometimes to get students to read, so that's the first thing that pops into my mind is that the students haven't read because the author, Smith, spends the entire section on page 117 discussing what ontological status means. And no one's giving me an answer, so I'm starting to get a little irritated. I'm like, come on, guys, nobody read. I said, come on, seriously. And a student finally says to me, he says, who's Smith and what is I can't even say that word, professor. And it turns out that I had the right lesson plan in mind, but for the wrong class.
Oh.
So it was not my intro to philosophy class. It was one of my other classes. And so I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute. You're not philosophy. You're my intro to religion class. Let me take out the other reading assignment. Let's talk about that. And so it was actually turned out to be pretty humorous because there I can't really escape that one, but to tell them, you know, guys, I am in the right class, but that's the wrong lesson. And so we all had a good laugh at that one.
I think that kind of goes into the same vein as like when a rock group or a performing act goes to a town and they're like, hello, Cleveland, and they're like, you're in Tucson, or you're in just the wrong place.
Yeah. And your lead guitarist comes up to you and says, Cleveland was last night.
Are there any moments you can think of where you just had like, I mean, that was a good example of maybe a brain fart in class or just in general. For example, this last semester, I was telling Pedro this off mic, I had a student email me from my 9 a.m. class, and she says, I know our group presentation is coming up. However, my grandma just recently passed away, and our family is distraught, so I will be there. I will be present, but I probably won't say much because I think every time I speak, I'm just going to start crying. And this wasn't one of those, my grandma passed away sort of excuses, because this was a good student. She never missed class. So I gave her some credibility with that. The next day rolls around, and I'm in my 8 a.m. class, and they give their presentations, and they leave, and I go up to a different student who I thought was a student who emailed me, and I say to her, I am so sorry for your grandma passing away. My deepest condolences. And she gives me a raised eyebrow, oddest look, like, what is this guy talking about? And then when I got to my next class, and the student who had emailed me, her group goes up there, and I made the connection. I said, in my head, I was like, oh crap, I gave condolences to the wrong student. Now I bet that student went home and is thinking, is everything okay with my grandmother? What happened to her?
Okay.
What is my teacher saying?
Okay, now 2 questions. The student that the student that you wrongly said my condolences, did she ever ask you any questions like why are you saying this to me?
No, she just sort of looked at me and just kind of nodded and was like, thank you.
And the next time you saw her, did you say
I
anything?
did. The next time I saw her in individual conferences, I apologized. I even told her, I said, listen, I completely had an oversight. I thought you were the one who emailed me. I, for some reason, connected you as this other student, so I do apologize. I hope your grandmother's okay. I didn't put a hex on her or anything like that.
Did she think it was a humorous?
Yeah, she thought she totally forgave my ineptitude in that moment.
But then when you did realize it was, oh wait, this is the student, you did say my condolences to the right student?
Yes, I did. I told both of them about the mix-up, and then I did correct. I did make right what I did wrong.
Yeah, that's something I would do, much to my shame. I would do something like that. It's not on purpose, but it just, these things happen. Students sometimes forget that we are human beings. I remember being as a kid, 3rd grade, walking home from school and seeing Mrs. Dumais in the parking lot. I think it was Mrs. Dumais, smoking a cigarette. As a 3rd grader, that was just the end of the innocence for me.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those things where you kind of see your teachers in real life, and the veil is then lifted.
Yeah, or at the grocery store.
Any other classroom maybe fails or falls or follies that you can think of right now before we take a commercial break, Pedro?
Well, as I said, I have so many, but here's another one. I think it's funny now. It's one of those things when it happens, you're horrified, but now you look back and laugh. So like many other instructors, I will work at more than one school, oftentimes. And so this was, probably at least a year ago. I'm sitting in the teacher's lounge at one of these schools, and I am chatting with coworkers, other teachers, the people that work in the office. We're just laughing and having a good time. And I get a phone call on my cell phone during that time. One of the secretaries here at school saying, "Peter, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" She's like, "Well, your class came to me asking where you were." And long story short, as it turns out, I had mixed up the times in my mind. And now this isn't the beginning of the semester. This was at least halfway through. So it wasn't like a beginning of the semester mistake. It was just a complete, I thought it was a 6 p.m. class, but it was a 5 p.m. class. Well, I have a 6 p.m. class at the other school on alternate days. So I got the schools mixed up, the times mixed up. And the funniest thing is of this whole story, the faculty office was probably 3 doors down from the classroom I had to be in.
That's incredible. And with that story, we'll be taking our first commercial break. Well, actually, our only commercial break here on Classroom Hacks, so we will be right back. What if there was a great place where you could network, learn, and apply your pedagogical knowledge? Well, fortunately for you, there is. College of DuPage will hold its annual Writing on the Edge conference on Saturday, October 20th. The theme for this year's conference is Composing Beyond Boundaries. Hear, learn, and examine the most modern discussions about methodology, classroom innovation, and faculty life in and outside of the world of academia. WOTE is always working to link disciplines, colleagues, students, and communities,
and would like to invite all instructors who use writing and multimodal practices in their courses. Find out more about WOTE from their website at writingontheedge.org. Hope to see you there in October.
And we are back.
Live and lively.
And so for this part of the episode, as we kind of brought up in the preview, we're going to kind of talk about student emails that we've received and wonder what exactly was going through the student's mind when they took the time to type it up, look at the screen, maybe not think about it too much, and then hit the send button, and then it comes through and you read and you say to yourself, where was this written? What were you on? And what were you even thinking when you sent this? And one of those emails that I think every teacher will get at some point.
But can I interrupt for 1 second? Yeah. Let me again ask you, just in case our listeners are wondering, why are we spending time talking about this topic about student emails? What's the relevance or significance?
Well, I think one of the things when it comes to failure, and this part of the episode is obviously just for a bit more levity for, I think, and every teacher I think can relate to this, that we check our emails and we probably get more emails than almost any other profession just because we're constantly looking at what our students are sending us, that every now and then a few are going to slip through the cracks. And just to kind of give a sort of lighthearted, relatable aspect to our listeners out there for this part of the show.
Yeah, I agree. And there is sometimes you just have to laugh at, not at the student, but sometimes the email. I mean, just like we've all sent out emails that were not our finest moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the emails that we all have gotten is the ever so popular email of, am I going to miss anything important, or did I miss anything important in class? And I can say probably I'll get 2 or 3 of those a semester. Sometimes if I have a student who's taken me in 2 consecutive classes, I might get that same email from that same student. And I don't know whether it's just a personality trait of the student type that sends those kind of emails, or if there's just this generic email button you can push and say send generic email, and here comes, did I miss anything important, or am I going to miss anything important? Pedro, do you have any thoughts on the am I going to miss anything important, or did I miss anything important?
Yeah, in fact, early in the semester, the first week, I tell them I really want them to interact with the material and have a lot of class discussion. And I tell them, ask any question. I said, there's only one dumb question you can ask. And I say this with a wink in my eye when I say it. And I tell them it's that question. The question when you're absent or going to be absent, and you say, and it's not, the question isn't, what am I going to miss, or what did I miss? That's a good question. That's a fair question. It's the exact way you put it. Am I going to miss anything important, or did I miss anything important? Because for a teacher, that's like a figurative dagger in the heart. Because to be very candid here, well, as we know, teachers put our blood, sweat, and tears into trying to get a good lesson plan, a meaningful experience for them in the classroom. And then when they say that, it's like, do you have any responses, Eric, that are funny, or that are, do you have a stock reply to a student, whether it's face-to-face or in an email that you give?
You know, early on in my career, I actually would take the time out and I gave students more of a response, an extensive response. So this is what we missed, X, Y, Z. And as Pedro brought up, as time went on and I began to cultivate more of the idea into my classroom, I said, listen, if you have a question, be specific. Let me know exactly what you want to know. But the more generic a question is going to be from you, the more generic a response is going to be from me. So, for example, if I get a question like, what did we miss in class today? Or is there anything I can fix on my project or essay after you review it? I told them, I said, if you give me a very generic question like that, I'm going to give you a very generic response. Like, what did I miss in class today? You're going to get a response like everything or nothing. Or if you say, what can I fix with my essay? I might say everything or nothing. And then therefore you have to determine whether you actually need to fix everything or you need to fix nothing. And why I do that is because I want them to elaborate. I want them to be critical. I want them to actually go in, take the time and say, okay, I know that in the last class we talked about this. Is there anything that relates to that, or did we start a new topic? Like Pedro said, these questions that are pointed, these questions that are elaborate, are things that we're more willing to answer because it shows that the student has listened, it shows that the student has been engaged, and it shows that the student has some sort of at least respect for your class, that they're willing to give you some sort of a bit more elaborate inquiry about what they might have missed or what they need to do going forward.
And one of our colleagues here, who I will not name because I'm not sure if he would want me to share this, although it's not scandalous, I asked him, I said, what do you do when a student says, did I miss anything important? He says, I just say to the student, yes. He goes, and then I just stop there and see what they say. So I thought that was a nice exercise in brevity and hopefully to pique the student's curiosity.
I would totally agree, and I think sometimes short responses will elicit longer reactions from students. One of the student emails that I had that I found most bizarre and interesting was an actual back and forth set of emails I had between two students who happened to be boyfriend and girlfriend in my class. And it first started with an email from the girlfriend emailing me about how her and her boyfriend, are going to be taking my class together, and if they can share notes about different things. And of course, I said, yeah, if one of you misses class, the other one can give notes. It's perfectly fine. And what was funny is that throughout the semester, I kind of saw this roller coaster of a relationship sort of play out, both in class and via email. And sometimes I would get an email from the boyfriend saying, hey, Mr. Tan, have I missed anything in class? I was asking my girlfriend, I'm going to leave nameless, but she's kind of not talking to me right now, so can you let me know what happened?
Oh my goodness, that is, I hate to say it, but that belongs in a movie script. That's funny.
I know, and then I would get emails from the girlfriend saying, like, I don't know what so-and-so told you, but I gave him the information, and he's just trying to paint himself a certain way. And so I would get these back and forth emails, and I'm thinking, I'm just like, is this something you really want to be sharing with me? Like, I'm not a therapist by any means, but I'll respond to your class questions. I don't know what I can do about your relationship issues, but maybe you can find some answers elsewhere.
Did you have to play relationship counselor at any point?
At maybe 3/4 of the way through the semester, I could definitely see things were getting tense, and so I did ask if, and it tends to the actual point where they said, can we come to class on alternate class days because I don't want to be in the same room as this person. And I said, if you can find a way to keep things copacetic in terms of being able to come to class and maybe not be next to each other so you can still get the information you need and learn what you need to learn. That's what being an adult is. You have to figure out how to make things work even in awkward situations. And so that's what ended up happening. I had to pull them aside and kind of have a talk with them about that.
Wow.
How about you? Any sort of correspondence or emails you can think of that stick out to you?
Let me think here. Well, just one quick comment is I love how, and love is in quotes, we'll get emails with no even hello or dear.
Oh, those
like
are the best.
Dear sir, is how do I say this? It's more like a tweet than an email.
Yeah, I think the populace is going in that direction.
Yeah, and so the email said, "Do we have a quiz today?" That's all it was. No hello, no thank you, no, and I think the D in the first word, the first letter of the first word, do, was not even capitalized, and there was no question mark at the end. And the answer to their question is in the syllabus, and we talked about it the class before, and all their classmates know. And I thought, we need to talk about life skills or soft skills in class maybe a bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example just of some of the many sort of emails we might just get. And in relation to what Pedro was saying about our general student population, or just this next generation, is that they're so used to texting, they're so used to tweeting, they're so used to having things not be grammatically correct and very concise in their sort of approach. And so a lot of times there is no appropriate means for how they address people. They don't necessarily take things in a more conversational tone. There's just more colloquial with some of these responses. And so we obviously know that many of you have dealt with some of these emails and issues. And so if you have any of your favorite emails that you can think of that you want to share with us, please just comment on Facebook, send us some direct messages. And if you have any great email stories, please send them to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and maybe we'll share them on some of our future episodes of Classroom Hacks. Pedro, is there anything else that you'd like to share about this episode, about failure, about emails before we go here?
Well, just failure overall. And this is something I try to share with students because, we want to. I always tell students, college isn't about getting you ready for the real world. Because I tell them, we're already in the real world. You've been alive, I tell them, for at least 18 years. It's just getting ready. We're trying to help them get ready for the next chapter, the next phase in life, as we said. And so I try to put in some motivational factors into class on a regular basis, because I tell them, I need them too. Life is tough. Life is hard. And so a couple of quotes here just to leave you with. One is from, I can't say his last name correctly, but if you Google the quote, you can find it. He's one of these guys who runs the ultra marathons, like those 100-mile races. And the quote, and now I feel on the spot here, I might butcher the quote, but it's something like, run if you can, walk if you must, crawl if you have to, just never give up. And the other one is from a famous acting coach, Russian acting coach, again, whose name is escaping me. I should have been more prepared for this. We're talking probably in the 20th century, maybe even the 19th century, and one of his students asked him, do you think I have talent? And he replied to her, never mind talent, do you have tenacity?
That's a great line.
And I tell them so much. Now, this quote I do remember. Okay, here's a third quote I'll throw in for free. It's from Woody Allen, who I tell them I don't necessarily look to as a paragon of virtue and character. But he did have a great quote where he says 80% of success is showing up. Mm-hmm. And I tell them there's a lot to be said for not giving up in life. So much of life is hanging in there and not giving up.
Yeah.
As cliche as it sounds, it's true.
Yeah, true today as it was when written. And that's the thing that I think we all try to instill into our students. And I tell my students all the time, listen, I would give anything to be on the other side of that desk again, to be a student. Because when you're a student, you have the ability to learn and you have the ability to fail without any extraordinary repercussion. And that's what class is for. Class isn't just about getting there, sitting down and just getting it. Class is about asking questions. Class is about finding the answers to the things you are unsure about, and just to test the waters of things that maybe you might not have a chance to talk about or have a chance to work at. And so I tell my students all the time, fail as often as you can, but learn from it and take the time to better it until you get it right, because this is the place where you can do it without having to worry about getting fired from a job, without having to worry about not getting paid, without having to worry about letting someone else down. You are in the place where you have the potential to fail as much as you want, but to learn from that failure. And so, with that being said, on our next episode, we are going to be talking about the interview process. For those of you who might be interviewing for a job, who have never interviewed for a job at a college level, that will be the episode that you definitely do not want to miss. And with that being said, again, Pedro, myself, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to remind all of our wonderful listeners that you can find exclusive Classroom Hacks content on our respective social media platforms. You can find daily advice, information, motivation, and hilarity, all for free. So find, follow, like, and enjoy Classroom Hacks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.